All right. Welcome everyone to this informational webinar about the new Goldsmith Prize for Explanatory Reporting. Thanks for being here on a Friday afternoon in dark December in some parts of the country. My name is Liz Schwartz. I'm the Director of Communications and Strategy at the Shorenstein Center on Media, Politics, and Public Policy at Harvard Kennedy School, which administers the Goldsmith Awards. And I am joined by friends Mike Greenfield, who is the CEO of Change Research and the president of the Greenfield Foundation, which supports the Goldsmith Awards, and David Rousseau, who is the publisher of KFF Health News and director of journalism at KFF, which was one of the co-winners of last year's inaugural special citation for government reporting, which led to the inauguration of this new prize in the Goldsmith Awards. I'm just going to start off with a little sort of housekeeping overview about the new prize. And then Mike and David will chat a little bit about sort of the goals and the value of the kind of reporting that this prize plans to honor. And then we'll open it up to your questions. So be thinking of those, and you can feel free to put them in the Q&A box if you have some right off the bat, and we'll get to them once we get there. So I will just share my screen for a little quick overview. All right, so the Goldsmith Prize for Explanatory Reporting is a new prize that is part of the Goldsmith Awards. The Goldsmith Awards have been administered by the Shorenstein Center for a little over 30 years now. It includes a long-running prize for investigative reporting that has had an impact on US public policy, as well as a book prize and a career award. And so the Explanatory Reporting Prize is the newest part of our awards program. It intends to honor journalism that fosters a better understanding of how the United States government works. So it is particularly focused on US government, and intends to really get into the kind of reporting that sort of peels back the layers of how government works and gives people a better sense of how government functions, when there are problems, where those problems come from, the kind of whys and the hows of government, rather than just the surface level what's. It should have a solutions lens on the problem. So not just reporting on problems, but really what solutions are being proposed, what solutions are in progress, what solutions have worked. Really solutions focused pieces that are about solving problems in government are welcome. And really just, is it wonky? Is it sort of really into the nitty gritty of policy implementation and government operations? That's the kind of reporting that we are looking for this prize. Eligibility is very similar to the Goldsmith Prize for investigative reporting, if you're familiar with that and have perhaps submitted to that in the past. It's open to US news media organizations and individuals who are working under journalistic standards. So we are open to sort of independent journalists, freelancers, folks like that, as long as you are operating under journalistic standards and have sort of a journalism background. Ideally with some sort of editorial oversight. Collaborations are welcome. So collaborations between newsrooms are welcome and encouraged. We have a lot of those that are submitted for the investigative prize. We love them. And so, please consider collaborations. Collaborations with non-news organizations can be considered as long as they are also operating under journalistic standards. It's a little bit of a fuzzy area. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. The pieces have to have been published between January 1st and December 31st of this year, 2024. So it is the 2025 Goldsmith Prizes, but they're given for work done in 2024. Pieces that are part of a series that were published outside of that period can be submitted as sort of extra material, but they won't be considered the core submission for the prize. Those core pieces have to have been published in this calendar year. And we're open to any media, print, digital, audio, video, film, or a combination of. The only thing is not allowed in this prize is full-length books, which are encouraged to be submitted for the Goldsmith Book Prize. The timeline, nominations opened today, this morning. They are open now. You can go in and check out the brand new revised submissions portal for both the Investigative Prize and the Explanatory Reporting Prize. The deadline is January 9th at 11:59 p.m. If you have a problem with the form at 11:59 p.m., we will not be awake to help troubleshoot that problem, most likely. So encourage you to at least work through a submission ahead of that time. Plan to submit it by around 5 p.m. Then you got a little cushion if something comes up. But yes, it is actually open until 11:59 p.m. The judging process is basically from then through late February. Winners will be notified in early March, and then the ceremony is in Cambridge at the Kennedy School on April 3rd, 2025. That is my quick overview. So I will now introduce Mike Greenfield, who is the longtime judge of the Goldsmith Awards and collaborator and friend of the program, as well as president of the Greenfield Foundation, which has been the longtime funder of this program. Talk about some of the inspiration for it.
Yeah, thanks, Liz, and thank you for putting this on and for all of the amazing work that you and the Shorenstein team do with the Goldsmith Awards program. 23 years ago, I took a call from my grandfather, Bob Greenfield, who originally worked with the Shorenstein Center to set up this prize over 30 years ago. And he asked me if I wanted to get involved with the Goldsmith program and to be a judge for the Goldsmith Awards. And I leapt at the opportunity, and I came for the first time in 2002. I have been part of the judging panel for 22 of the last 23 years. And enjoy being part of that, even if it means going to Boston from my California home in wintertime. For the first few years of that, Bob joined me in judging. And one of the things that he was most adamant about was the role that we play in trying to improve public policy. And that is really a key piece of the Goldsmith Awards program, that we want to make public policy in the U.S. better than it is today. And we're super proud that over the last 30 plus years, we have awarded so many stories with the Shorenstein Center with the Goldsmith Prize. And just so much great work at every level of government that looks at so much that affects the American people. And one of the things that is really central to the Goldsmith Award is finding waste, finding fraud, finding abuse that happens in government. And that is incredibly important, and it's a role that we're super proud to play, and we're grateful for the Shorenstein Center's partnership on it. At the same time, one of the things that I've personally been reading about and trying to get my head around is the cases where government is well-intentioned and is trying to do right by its people, but is maybe not able to serve people in the way that they wish they could. I strongly recommend Jen Palka's book, Recoding America, as one great example of how that can manifest itself. And been talking for the last year or two with the team at the Shorenstein Center about how can we encourage journalism that spotlights those challenges and helps to provide a path forward. And that's really what we're trying to do with this new award, is to highlight government that is well-intentioned, but that maybe isn't having the effect that it could have. And sometimes, in some cases, that can be about explaining why it is the way it is. In some cases, it can actually be about pointing out good things that are going on in government, or maybe in a comparative way, this is going well in one place, but it's not going as well somewhere else. And so we're super proud and super excited to be working on this new prize. David Rousseau, who you'll hear from soon, led the team that won the first prize this past year. And he'll tell you a little bit more about that. It's fantastic work that KFF and that team did. But really the goal is to spotlight a different kind of reporting and encourage it as much as we can. And we're grateful for to the Shorenstein Center for partnering with us to make that happen.
Thanks, Mike. David, would love to hear your sort of thoughts about last year's special citation winner, overpayment outrage, and then kind of how your newsroom thinks about this kind of reporting and why you're excited about it.
Great. Well, thank you, Liz, and thank you, Mike, for the vision to create this prize in the first place. It's not every day someone creates a prize that recognizes the work that you sort of started your newsroom to do, which at KFF Health News, we really do focus on the impact on policy in the health space on people's lives and their livelihoods, and the things that government does well and doesn't do so well. And we have, throughout our history, focused on doing the accountability journalism that needs to be done in the health space, some of the solutions journalism that needs to be done, but also just the explanatory work, because our healthcare system needs some explaining, and people don't understand why government programs work and don't work and how changes may affect their lives. And our reporting has really tried to shine a light on that through the lens of people. And I think that this prize that you've established will try to help other newsrooms think about how their reporting can explain the role that government plays in all of our lives, the visible hand and the invisible hand that it often plays in so many various aspects of the country. Our reporting that we did that was recognized. I get to be here as publisher today. David Hilsenrath and John Hillkirk and Kelly Johnson were really the reporters and editors who made the magic happen in our newsroom. And I think it was really a great example of a collaboration as well. As you mentioned at the beginning, a lot of times some of the best projects are collaborations. And for this one, we worked with Cox Media Group, and we brought the expertise on health and health reporting with their ability to take local stations and tell the story locally in a lot of different markets across the country, which I think helped to raise awareness of the issues we were trying to cover, because it reached an audience who read the digital story and those who watched the television segments that were about it. And we showed in that reporting that the Social Security Administration was reducing or suspending benefit checks to people to recoup large debts for money that they had received through no fault of their own. It was a miscalculation that Social Security had made. And this was impacting millions of people and involving tens of billions of tax dollars. And we show that there were 2 million Americans hit each year with demands for repayment, a number Social Security had not published before or talked about before. And the agency denied multiple requests for that information. Our reporting had resulted in a lot of policy change, but also explained to people how Social Security works. A lot more people understand if they get hit with these demands, their recourses of how they can appeal them. And the collaboration, I think, was a big part of the success of it. It's the reporting, which I'm really proud of, has gone on to win a lot of awards, but it was really this one that I think is most in line with our mission and the focus that we have on trying to explain how government programs impact people's lives and how they can be improved, or how they could be better utilized and replicated in other places. So it's a real pleasure to be here today. Thank you again for the opportunity, for recognizing us. And I hope that the prize results in many more newsrooms on many different topics other than health. We're going to continue to focus on health, as I know others will, but there's lots of other areas where there needs to be better explanatory reporting and more explanatory reporting about how government is affecting people's lives and the things that it can do better, or the things it's already doing really well that people may not recognize. So thanks again. I look forward to the Q&A.
Thanks, David. And I think, Mike, feel free to jump in here, but I remember from the judging process last year, the thing that really stuck out to many of the judges about that reporting was how clearly the way that this was sort of unfolding was reported, that you really understood like where the problem spots were, why it was that they, one part of the administration didn't know that certain things were happening and clawbacks were happening in ways that maybe they shouldn't have been, and where the sort of data breakdowns were and that kind of stuff. And that was really an impressive thing that stood out about the reporting.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. And I remember reading a comment from one government official saying we didn't realize this was going on, and now we'll look into it. And obviously one wishes that the government was aware of those kinds of problems, but to the extent that the journalism can play that kind of role, it's amazing, and it's also amazing for us to be able to award and recognize it.
Thanks. We have a couple of questions. There's one question about whether sort of what realms of government reporting counts for this prize, and it's any level. So it can be local, state, county, and as well as federal. So, you've got a really good story on how participatory budgeting works in your city, submit it. We're really looking at all levels, as well as all levels of newsrooms, local, national, regional, even internationally focused newsrooms. If you're looking at a US sort of public policy concern or US government process, that will count. I asked a question about asking, do you need to have a journalism degree? Not necessarily. As I've sort of said at the beginning, the standard there is, are you operating under journalistic standards and ethics? So generally that tends to mean that you have worked in some sort of formal newsroom with editorial standards, operating under, journalistic ethics, but could now mean that you are outside of that structure. So sort of independent journalists who have that training would certainly qualify, but you don't need to necessarily have a degree in journalism to count as a journalist these days, I would say. And there's a question on sort of just the mechanics of the submissions. So all of the submissions are online. There's an online portal that you can access that actually gives you access to both the investigative prize submission form as well as the explanatory prize submission form. And there's a series of questions. So it asks for sort of general information about the piece, the newsroom or the authors, contact information, things like that, as well as I think 3 longer answer questions about how the piece really dives into explaining something about government or public policy implementation, what its solutions focus is, so talking about that a little bit, and then kind of anything else that we should know, judges should know about the piece, the process of reporting it, any impacts that it had, anything like that. So that's quite an open-ended question of just sort of anything else we should know that would help in this selection process. The character limits for those fields are pretty broad. We asked for not a novel, so try to keep it to sort of 800 words max. I think the character limit is quite longer than that, but keep it to something that judges should sort of easily be able to read and digest. It's a question from Leah saying, many contests have both explanatory and investigative categories. How are you defining the difference between the two? I see you can submit the same work to both contests, but if it wins, it would only win one. Yes. So you can submit the same piece. So there's a lot of sort of reporting that kind of crosses these lines, which is why we allow something to be submitted to both, but we will at some point in the judging process sort of, either it will continue progressing on one and not the other, or we will make a decision. We think this is a better fit for one than the other. I don't know, Mike or David, do you want to weigh in at all on sort of that question of the distinction? I can talk about how we're thinking about it, but maybe David, do you have any thoughts about how your team sort of defines explanatory versus investigative reporting, if you even do?
I mean, I think that there's often good investigative reporting that results in explaining a lot of the world to people. So I don't think there's a firm, bright white line between the two. But I do think the best in our space, at least in health, explanatory reporting does reveal something new that people didn't know that usually needed to be investigated or reported. But I think if you do the investigation without actually explaining to people why this happened and why it is the way it is and how it can be fixed, so it's why, I said at the outset, we try to do explanatory solutions and investigative accountability journalism. And I think the 3 need to work together if you're going to actually help people understand our healthcare system and make things better. And that, I think, is a similar approach that a lot of what you're looking for should take. But I think given this prize, you're really looking for things that that do explain the world to people and how a government program is working or not working. And I can't imagine you doing that well if it doesn't involve a little bit of investigation.
Mike, do you have any input on that question?
I am well, as a non journalist, I will probably defer to the experts on drawing those exact lines, but I think in investigative journalism, I mean, from my vantage point, and it is sort of uncovering things. The bulk of the work is uncovering things that are completely new, and explanatory is more about combining things in new ways. But to David's point, it's like there's going to be some mix of the two in either direction.
Yeah, I think that's been our general conversation about this, is that we've been calling it explanatory because the distinction here is that it really does need to get into the sort of weeds of explaining the thing rather than just kind of revealing something. So the investigative prize, I think, as David said, ideally all investigative pieces are also kind of explaining how you got there and what the different factors are. But the investigative focus is really on uncovering something that wasn't known, or really digging into something that wasn't known. The explanatory prize could be something that is like a little more known. It could be something that everybody kind of, knows that this thing exists, but nobody really understands why it's not working as well as it should. And what you're explaining and uncovering in potentially also an investigation is that why, right? And the how. So I think that's where we draw the distinction, but it is a fuzzy line. So that's, you're welcome to sort of submit to both, or if you have specific questions about a specific piece, you're welcome to reach out to us and we can chat about it. There's a question about the judges. So the judging panel for this prize is separate from the judging panel for the investigative prize. It will be made up of a combination of people who have actually worked in government, have direct experience working in government, and journalists who have done this kind of reporting. So the names of those judges is generally kept private until the awards are announced. But they are all kind of experts in their fields and will have different lenses and expertise to be able to bring to looking at the different submissions. And then there's a question about reporting on like a human rights treaty that affects both Americans and people who live abroad, and would that qualify? This is always a gray area, both in the investigative prize and here, when it's sort of US public policy that is affecting the world. And the reporting is both international and national. I think generally, though, if the focus of the piece is explaining how the US government works and how the piece of policy is being implemented, and it is a US public policy issue, it would count. Mike, you've been in a lot of those conversations, Mike, about sort of international versus US impact for the investigative prize. I don't know if you want to talk about that, how those conversations sometimes go.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then we've had with the investigative reporting prize, we've had a number of submissions that have been on the borderline, and ultimately it is about the US government or local state governments inside the US, and two, the kind of impact that they have, the kind of impact that the governments and their policies and people involved with them have, generally speaking, inside the US, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's 100% only based on the effects of Americans.
Excuse me. There's a question about the solutions focus of the prize, and if that is not a strong focus of the entry, is it worth submitting it? Again, Mike, I'd love your input here, but I think the solutions focus element of the criteria is really kind of driving at the point that Mike made earlier, that what we're looking for is not reporting that is really focused on sort of waste, fraud, abuse, corruption, things like that, alone. So if there is a problem that's been uncovered, it could be in that sort of a problem, that then there is the piece of what is being done or what are the potential solutions. So I think if you're looking at a problem and sort of uncovering a problem, then a solutions lens would be very important. If you are really explaining something that may not be a sort of current problem, then it doesn't necessarily need an explicit solutions part of the reporting. Does that sound right to you, Mike?
Yeah, I would say it's important, and but the relative the specific importance of solutions journalism is going to be somewhat dependent on the problem. And that if, there may be the case that you're saying state of Utah is fantastic at this, but the state of Arizona is not so good. And, maybe not every detail is of why Utah is better is highlighted, but there's sort of here are 4 things that are different about the 2 states. And that creates a valuable insight into what can go well and what can go less well, and that would I think that a story like that could be compelling and would exhibit would merit consideration.
David, I'm curious how your newsroom thinks about solutions in your reporting. Is it always an intent, or is it a sort of happy moment when you do have a solution that you could include in reporting? How do you kind of work through that?
I think for our project enterprise reporting, it is nice to be able to point to some possible solutions without recommending them. And the policy process usually needs to work those out, and we can point in the direction of things that policymakers could do to address issues. But I do think when you're trying to explain a very complicated aspect of the healthcare system, particularly government programs, to people, if you don't offer them solutions to what they could do, the reporting won't have as much impact. We have a big project we've done called Bill of the Month, where people submit their medical bills, and the reason why their medical bills are often landing in their inboxes are either business or regulatory. So I think we do try to give people a roadmap to explaining why this happened and what possible solutions for themselves are, as well as possible solutions to the problem more holistically. But I do think that it does sometimes go beyond the scope of the project to get deep into the solutions, elevating the issue and explaining it to people, and letting the policy process develop the solutions is more of what I think we focus on in our project's work.
I think that point about sort of individual focused solutions is a good one, though, too. Sometimes the solutions lens could be, how can people better take advantage of this public policy program, or safety net things, because sometimes the concern is just that people don't know enough about something to be able to benefit from it,
right? Or know how to navigate it,
right? Or know how to navigate it. So even just like a little explainer of how do you kind of get hooked in and where do you go to find out more, could be part of a solutions lens.
Yep.
I'm just going to read out this question. Is it fair to say that the ultimate purpose of this prize is to empower ordinary Americans to realize there's a problem with the way their government works, and especially what they can do about it, including, for example, explaining what people in another state have done to address the problem you're exposing in your state, so readers know who to contact, who can help advise about what worked or didn't work in their model law or other solution? I'd certainly say that that is a great outcome of the kind of reporting that the prize will honor. I don't know that it's the only one, but yeah, I think that allowing Americans, people living in this country, to understand how their government works and what they can do to change that or engage with it in various ways is certainly one of the goals.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think that shining a light on what works and maybe what doesn't work is key to this prize. it can be I would say mostly focused on ordinary Americans. It could be the case that this is, if a piece is read by 7 people at high levels of government and almost nobody else, but it has an influence on those 7 people, and they use it to improve the way that government functions, that would also be a great outcome. And I'm sure there are other possibilities in terms of who sees it and how it actually has an effect. But that would be a good example, as exactly as you said, Liz.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's the difference here between this and the investigative prize being that direct impact. The investigative prize, the Goldsmith Investigative Prize, does require some sort of really direct impact. This prize's impact can be much more diffuse. And so, being read and acted upon by one really influential person in government could lead to that kind of impact. Question about the number of entries allowed per news organization. So for the Goldsmith Investigative Prize, we only allow 2 entries per lead or sort of primary submitting news organizations. You could have more that you are a partner on or a collaborator on, but only 2 per lead organization. You're correct that this prize, for this year at least, we are allowing more submissions than that. So there's not a cap of 2 per lead organization. I would say if one news organization is submitting 10, it may not be detrimental, but they will end up sort of competing with themselves. So it is to your best interest to try to whittle it down. But say 4 from one news organization that's doing a lot of this kind of reporting is totally acceptable. All right. Any other questions? Yep. So submissions require a link to up to 5 items and a PDF version of those stories. Yes. We do require, and as well as the links need to have either logins to be able to access them if they're behind a paywall or a login subscription, or be outside of a paywall or a login need. The PDF is particularly important for anything that is a sort of video or audio component. We do require some kind of transcript of the video or audio in that PDF, or also could be separately, but as well as inside that PDF. But the PDF is just really helpful for our judges because there are so many different ways to access pieces that having that sort of all-in-one document is really useful. If you have questions about that, feel free to reach out to us, or there's an example of a formatted one. Generally, a print to PDF of your page, if it is a web publication, will work as long as it doesn't get garbled by images or pop-ups or anything like that. A couple more questions. You were certainly welcome to reach out to us to discuss if a piece seems appropriate for the prize. We are a small team, so I can't promise that we will get back to you immediately, but we will try to get back to everyone as quickly as we can. And you're also welcome to sort of poke around the website. I'll pop up a slide at the end with some different contact information and things, but some more information there. And there's a question about college journalists. We have had submissions in the past from college newspapers, as long as they're operating with some sort of editorial oversight and journalistic training. So some college newspapers have that, some don't. So if you are submitting from that sort of a publication, please just include something in your submission about sort of the editorial standards, oversight, and journalistic standards that the publication upholds. Also, we have certainly had collaborations between like a college paper or group and a professional journalism organization. Those are very welcome. And yes, audio podcast episodes are very allowed. So podcasts, documentary films are allowed, short form video, TV journalism, radio journalism, print, digital, all of the above. All right, well, I will just pop this up. Whoop. 1 second. There we go. All right, so if you have any further questions, please visit goldsmithawards.org, which has information about the new prize as well as the other categories of prizes for the Goldsmith Awards. You can follow the Shorenstein Center on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, Twitter/X, and Blue Sky, where we will mostly share updates about the deadline and reminders for the deadline. But occasionally we will share, information about past winners and other things like that. We also share other great content, so follow us. And then you can contact myself. My email address is there as well as on our website. And then my colleague, Lindsay Underwood, who's our Assistant Director of Communications, and is the contact person on the Goldsmith Awards website. If you look at the page, you'll see her email in the sidebar there. So either of us or both of us are always, happy to answer questions. As I said, we can't promise that we'll get back to you like immediately, but we will get back to you as soon as we can. And let's check for any other questions. Great. Well, Mike and David, thank you so much for joining us today for this. And David, thank you for your great work. We look forward to seeing more of it. And thank you all for joining and for your interest in this new prize. We're really excited about it. So please reach out and keep in touch if you have other questions, and we'll look forward to your submissions. Oh yes, and the ceremony for the Goldsmith Awards is April 3rd. It will be live streamed as well as in person here in Cambridge. So save the date. Thank you all.
Thank you, Liz.
There.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you.